Yes.
The most visible place.
Very, very smart.
What?
No, you were the former kid. Exactly. How are you? Thank you very much. How are you? Thank you.
Of the University of East Africa. And the first recipient on that occasion of our honorary degree was President Kenyatta. He was the first recipient of honorary degree
From at that time then the East African University.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
We'll give you the photo.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and the chancellor until the three councils decided to make the campus an independent university.
Oh, lovely.
This is a book that celebrates Makerele's
100 years. Oh, lovely. Lovely, lovely. And I can see our building here.
Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yes.
The most visible place.
Very, very smart.
What?
Promote democracy and the rule of law.
Yes.
The most visible place.
Very, very smart.
What?
No, you were the former kid.
My colleagues, Natasha, Patience, Katolaban, most people
capacities and greet you in the name of the Almighty Lord. Good morning. My name is Ssentamu Churchill James. I am a second year student pursuing a bachelor's degree in social sciences. I am the 91st Guild President of Makerere University, what was formerly known as University of East Africa. I've gotten to know that from Professor Barnabas Nawangwe. Ladies and gentlemen, I equally join my voice with the different voices that have welcomed you all, but I would equally want to associate myself with the already established protocol and welcome you all in their different capacities. Thank you very much for sparing the time to come and really grace this function. The young people in this building are very, very pleased to have you today. Your Excellencies, just like Nelson Mandela said, that the youth of today are the leaders of tomorrow, I beg to object that in our current continent, the youth of today are the leaders of today. Shared vision for our nations, our continent, and our future. Malcolm X once said that the future belongs to those who prepare for it today, and I believe we are on the right due course to prepare for our future. Ladies and gentlemen, we the youth are no longer leaders of tomorrow. We are leaders of today in our universities, communities, and even households. We are shaping narratives, challenging norms, and demanding for better. And as we gather here, we are reminded that leadership is not about the titles we hold, but the change we create. Makerere University, as the oldest and most prestigious institution in the region, I beg your pardon, holds a proud legacy of producing leaders who have shaped this continent and the region at large. From heads of state to change makers in each and every astounding field. But even as we celebrate the past, we must confront the realities of today. Our generation faces great challenges. Unemployment continues to undermine our indeed established potential. Education systems, Mr. President and Madam Vice President, are struggling to adapt to the digital age. Mental health is often overlooked and has become a very silent crisis. And across the region, the youth feel unheard in national policy and decision-making processes. But we are not here to lament, ladies and gentlemen. We are here to lead and be proprietors of the change with this right online voting system, which would really benefit the country. It is at this juncture that I informally request you to accept my cabinet with you and have you benchmark the voting process at Makerere University, saving the neighborhoods today. We, in the long run, are co-creators of solutions. Invest not just in infrastructure, but in innovation, not just in programs, but in people. To my fellow guild presidents and student leaders, as I wind up, let this summit not be the end of a conversation, but the beginning of a movement. Let us return to our campuses, our jurisdictions with renewed purpose, to advocate, to mobilize and serve with integrity. Let us build bridges across borders, Mr. President, share ideas and stand united in our diversity, because the future of East Africa is not written by one nation alone, but by the unity of many. Let me end with the words of Franz Fanon, who spoke and said, each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. Mr. President and our guests today, we are not the reincarnated Judas Iscariots of today, but we are leaders like you that are ready to take on our mantle and fulfill our missions. We build for the future, for God and my country.
Dear presidents, student leaders from across our East Africa region, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me say what an honor it is to stand here to address this very distinguished gathering of young leaders from across the East African region. I myself am extremely happy to be here in this great city of Kampala, which I consider to be my home away from home. And from here, all of you who have come from different parts of East Africa, as you sit atop this Makerere hill, all I can say is that that is reminiscent and a sight that has been shared by many, many over the years. Allow me at the very onset to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Guild President's Leadership Academy for organizing this summit, and also to Makerere University, through you, Vice Chancellor, for hosting us at this esteemed institution, which, as you reminded us, is the foundation of East African higher education. All of us are children of Makerere, and we are happy and proud to be. And we're also happy to see that Makerere continues to serve as the furnace upon whose flames the ideologies of many African leaders in the past and most definitely in the future will continue to be forged. So, ladies and gentlemen, getting straight to the point, to state that today we are living in a tumultuous time would be somewhat of an understatement. The traditional world order that we have become accustomed to is being upended before our very eyes. The forces of nationalistic politics are fast eroding the foundations of multilateral institutional frameworks that have formed the substructure of global geopolitics for many decades. From the uncertain policies emanating from Washington, D.C., that are reshaping the rules of global trade, to the all-consuming conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza that risk becoming the nuclei for wider regional conflicts, we are indeed witnessing a watershed moment in the history of our world. As an African leader, I view these developments from a somewhat broader context beyond the uncertainty of growing global tensions. I recognize that we, as Africans, are simultaneously besieged by disruption, chaos, and confusion on the one end, but also, I believe, immense opportunity and promise of prosperity on the other end. To illustrate further on this statement that seems contradictory on the face of it, I will draw from two examples that some of you may find familiar, given the fact that it was mentioned here also.
Your Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, the fourth president.
Oh, okay. The first is the recent suspension of USAID funding, primarily directed at developing nations, and the second is a glimpse at the direction that European politics is taking and its implications on Africa. Whereas the stoppage of US-led international development aid has had an immediate and far-reaching implications on our fragile healthcare systems, I believe it has also been a much-needed wake-up call to our leaders and policymakers, that they should recognize that our economies have become woefully dependent on the charity of foreign governments, and it is now the time to lay the foundation for self-sufficiency. The sunset of USAID has forced a level of economic policy introspection unseen in Africa for decades. And I believe the situation calls for a serious rethink in our development priorities as African governments. Difficult and unfamiliar choices will have to be made going forward. Our governments across the continent must weigh whether buying bullets to restock their armories is better than use of scarce resources for producing vaccines and mosquito nets needed to protect our infants from disease. Prioritization of expenditure in the absence of African-financed subsidies in the health sector and in the education sector means that more attention is going to be paid by our citizens to the way governments handle their finances. And and this will inevitably translate into demands for greater public participation and transparency in public financial management. The second dimension is what we are seeing in Western Europe with each passing year. More and more governments are leaning further and further to the right. The election of populist, nationalist administrations has been catalyzed by various factors. Among them, the huge cost of living attributed to the side effects of global shocks, and the scramble for stretched social services. Services that must be shared with millions of migrants flowing in from Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and significantly from Africa. This right-leaning scenario that we see in Europe has some near-term implications for Africa. The truth of the matter is, the Europeans no longer want to see our immigrant boats laden with our young men and women landing on their shores. They are currently busy enacting laws to ensure that we never set foot in their countries, to partake in their resources without proper immigration documents. Our young people will soon have nowhere left to escape, nowhere to run away from the wars and poverty that define much of our continent's present realities. So what? With nowhere to go but home, with no one to turn to but themselves, I believe that our young people, and that is you, will eventually wake up to the fact that there is no global rescue mission coming to save you. We must save ourselves from a future of despair. To state that today we are living in a tumultuous time would be somewhat of an understatement. The traditional world order that we have become accustomed to is being upended before our very eyes. The forces of nationalistic politics are fast eroding the foundations of multilateral institutional frameworks that have formed the substructure of global geopolitics for many decades. From the uncertain policies emanating from Washington, D.C., that are reshaping the rules of global trade, to the all-consuming conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza that risk becoming the nuclei for wider regional conflicts, we are indeed witnessing a watershed moment in the history of our world. As an African leader, I view these developments from a somewhat broader context beyond the uncertainty of growing global tensions. I recognize that we, as Africans, are simultaneously besieged by disruption, chaos, and confusion on the one end, but also, I believe, immense opportunity and promise of prosperity on the other end. To illustrate further on this statement that seems contradictory on the face of it, I will draw from two examples that some of you may find familiar given the fact that it was mentioned here also.
Your Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, the fourth president.
Oh, okay. The first is the recent suspension of USAID funding, primarily directed at developing nations, and the second is a glimpse at the direction that European politics is taking and its implications on Africa. Well, whereas the stoppage of US-led international development aid has had an immediate and far-reaching implications on our fragile healthcare systems, I believe it has also been a much-needed wake-up call to our leaders and policymakers, that they should recognize that our economies have become woefully dependent on the charity of foreign governments, and it is now the time to lay the foundation for self-sufficiency. The sunset of USAID has forced a level of economic policy introspection unseen in Africa for decades. And I believe the situation calls for a serious rethink in our development priorities as African governments. Difficult and unfamiliar choices will have to be made going forward. Our governments across the continent must weigh whether buying bullets to restock their armories is better than use of scarce resources for producing vaccines and mosquito nets needed to protect our infants from disease. Prioritization of expenditure in the absence of African financed subsidies in the health sector and in the education sector means that more attention is going to be paid by our citizens to the way governments handle their finances. And this will inevitably translate into demands for greater public participation and transparency in public financial management. The second I mentioned is what we are seeing in Western Europe with each passing year. More and more governments are leaning further and further to the right. The election of populist, nationalist administrations has been catalyzed by various factors. Among them, the huge cost of living attributed to the side effects of global shocks, and the scramble for stretched social services. Services that must be shared with millions of migrants flowing in from Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and significantly from Africa. This right-leaning scenario that we see in Europe has some near-term implications for Africa. The truth of the matter is, the Europeans no longer want to see our immigrant boats laden with our young men and women landing on their shores. They are currently busy enacting laws to ensure that we never set foot in their countries, to partake in their resources without proper immigration documents. Our young people will soon have nowhere left to escape, nowhere to run away from the wars and poverty that define much of our continent's present realities. So what? With nowhere to go but home, with no one to turn to but themselves, I believe that our young people, and that is you, will eventually wake up to the fact that there is no global rescue mission coming to save you. We must save ourselves from a future of despair. Our young people will have to play your part in reshaping the destinies of our countries of birth, and you will help us realize that this is the moment for each and every one of you to step onto the stage. Your time has come. In both these examples that I have drawn from, there is a clear illustration of the type of challenges that define the moment that we are currently living in. Conversely, the same examples also provide the perfect segue for us to explore the opportunities exist that exist for a new generation of young leaders. A generation who will chart a better path for Africa, and I do believe that is what has brought us together this morning. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we seek to navigate the challenges of our time, let us take a moment to reflect on three questions that I believe will serve to frame the context of our discussion, and some of them actually I have already witnessed being raised here today. And the first of these is, what does it mean to be a young African in a world where developed nations are focusing inward, prioritizing their national interests over their global responsibilities? The second is, what does it mean to be a young African living on a continent that has over 35 non-international armed conflicts taking place, with millions facing displacement and food insecurity as a result? And lastly, what does it mean to be a young African competing for limited economic opportunities with close to 1 billion other young people across our continent? These, my friends, are existential questions for you, the young people of Africa, and they cannot be easily answered without a deeper understanding of how we arrived at this point. With the exception of Ethiopia, most of the rest of Africa has a dark colonial past that has, in a large part, been shaped, and has, in a large part, shaped by the thinking of post-independence generations. When the wave of liberation swept across Africa in the early 1960s, late 1950s, it heralded new beginnings for all of us, as we have heard from our fathers here. It was an opportunity to govern ourselves and to determine our priorities. As our leaders sought to dismantle the vestiges of colonialism, there was widespread optimism that our newly independent states would create the environment for their citizens to thrive. You heard how, even in East Africa, they wanted from day one to form a federation right from the onset. And for a time, we lived the dream and savored the early wins of being our own masters. However, unfortunately, over time, instead of dismantling the colonial legacy, we inherited it and customized it even further to create a new African style of leadership. A style that leaned heavily on patronage, ethnic and religious mobilization, elitism and favoritism, the result of which was a quick deterioration in national cohesion, the entrenchment of corruption as an evil that led to the stagnation of our economies. There's a story President Museveni likes to tell of a leader, I don't like mentioning names, but one of our forefathers, who, when being questioned as to why he didn't want this federation to proceed, couldn't give a good explanation. But another Ugandan parliamentarian challenged him and said, the problem is that you want to be a big fish in a little pond so that you can sit on all the other little fish. And unfortunately, that was the mentality that resulted in many a problem on this continent. These weaknesses exposed our underbellies and left us vulnerable once again to the whims of foreign powers. They have exposed these vulnerabilities in our political constructs to manipulate our development trajectory as Africans, and unfortunately we are almost back to square one. They This, however, is a story of years gone by. It does not have to be how our future will evolve. Now that we have an insight as to how we got here, I believe let us focus our attention on how to get out of this quandary that we find ourselves in. And we begin this by taking the first question: what does it mean today to be a young African in a world where developed nations are focused inward, prioritizing their national interests? Ladies and gentlemen, having served as president, I appreciate fully the pressure that elected leaders face on a daily basis. They have to be in tune with the mood and desires of their voting public and be seen to be directing the government's energies towards addressing these demands. Can we therefore really blame the governments of developed nations for responding to their needs, to the needs of their own citizens above all others? We can't. That is what they do. So us as well, it is time for us to also stop lamenting about the inward-looking policies of faraway democracies and nations. And we should instead be asking ourselves, why is it that we as Africans don't prioritize our own interests above all else? The duty of a responsible government is to discharge its primary mandate of serving the interests of its citizens. In many nations across Africa, we have somehow managed to invert the order of this relationship. Instead, the citizens are subservient to the government and are compelled to adjust their behavior in order to promote the interests of the state, which in many instances are almost indistinguishable from personal interests. So you, as young African leaders, you know well, as I do, that this situation is untenable. The economic opportunities you desire in order to live your best lives can only be created by governments that are designed to serve the citizens and not governments whose only reason for existence is to exploit, manipulate, and drain the resources of their countries and citizens for personal gain. That is what is happening in all these conflicts you see around here. Don't be cheated there about anything else. Ni pesa. Yeah? People are killing each other, people are allowing their children to be killed, people are causing all sorts of problems, claiming this and claiming that and claiming the other. It's all about their pockets. Yeah? And that's why when they are finished destroying their countries, you see them board planes and you never hear from them again, but you never see your money again, and you are left with your wounds. You must stop that. Allow me to remind you once again that there is nobody coming to our rescue, and in a world that is becoming more insular, there will soon be nowhere to run. So let us fix our continent. It is therefore my considered submission that the answer to our first question is that you as young leaders must recognize that this is your independence moment, and that you are officially the freedom fighters of this era. You are the last line of defense in the battle to rescue the heart and soul of Africa for the sake of future generations. And your mission is to embrace your civic duty and choose governments that are responsive to your needs. Young leaders in East Africa, ladies and gentlemen, let me now turn to the second question. What does it mean to be a young African living in a continent that has over 35 non-international armed conflicts taking place, with millions facing displacement and food insecurity? Today in Africa, from the Sahel to the Great Lakes to the Horn, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Red Sea, over 500 million of your colleagues and counterparts are caught up in some type of armed conflict or political strife. Inevitably, these are impacting mostly women, children, and the young people. I talked earlier about how the colonial legacy was replaced in many countries by a style of leadership that draws its strength from creating and exploiting societal fissures along religious, racial, or ethnic lines as a pretext for the accumulation of economic and political power by a select few. I hold the view that this is never going to be a stable method of governance for the long term for a number of basic reasons. Firstly, the corruption that arises from it only serves to undermine public interest and diverts resources from essential services, sowing the seeds of resentment among the populace. Secondly, the politics of ethnicity, favoritism, and patronage at the expense of meritocracy are the quickest ways in which to erode national unity. Thirdly, personalization of the state means that institutions designed to safeguard continuity of governments are weakened. In all these three instances, you end up with a large section of the population that are physically resident within the borders of a country, but are psychologically and emotionally disengaged. That is what you call apathy. And I heard you guys trying to talk here about apathy. That is what causes apathy. Because the people you want to lead are disengaged from yourselves. And I just want to refer, I was listening very carefully to everything that was going and being said. And I had some, what do we do about, our voters who are asking us for money, they're asking us for money. They're asking you for money because you as a leader have failed. No matter how many laws you put in place to stop, we are going to cap how much money is going to be given, somebody will still give the money, law or no law. The problem is to fix the issue. Because your primary responsibility as a member of parliament, my friend, is to represent your people, is to oversight the government of the day. Alright? Now, if you have failed in your responsibility of representing your people to ensure that the government of the day has given them their ambulance, that has given them their health center, has given them their school and water, why are you then surprised when the Mwananchi comes to you and says, I want this ambulance and you're supposed to bring it to me? But he's not asking it from you. He's asking it from you because you have failed in your duty to represent. And that is why we are saying we want leaders with integrity, who will go and stand for what their people have sent them to parliament to do. You were sent to parliament to go and speak on behalf of your people, not to speak on behalf of your stomach, my friend. This is the problem we have here. And we must be honest with each other. Yeah? So if you are to be leaders, you must be led by service to your people, not service to your stomach. That is the reason you seek leadership. Yeah? That is why, and that is how you will change this country. That is how you will change East Africa. That is how you will change Africa. That is how you will get the world to recognize you. That is how you will get the world to respect you. That is how we will stop being beggars. That is how your children will have hope instead of going to die in some sea there, crossing to Europe to look for nothing. Now, I'm going to go. Unawacha matoke hapa ati uende kule Burger King na McDonald's kule. Who is the food? Matoke here fresh, wonderful and beautiful to go and line up huko. Ukula burger ambaye inakuonesha tumbo tu na Amani namna gani? Yes, that is the way. So, let me continue. I'm sorry. In all three instances, you end up, like I said, with a large section of the population that is physically resident within the borders of the country, but is psychologically and emotionally disengaged. A people excluded from the role of nation building because they feel like they are outsiders or bystanders in their own country. Of almost every crisis in our part of the world, the common denominator is the absence of inclusive, responsive leadership. Further, I believe it is essential for you as young leaders to appreciate the fact that these fisheries that I speak about are visible beyond our continent. Others can see these fishers. They are looking at us through their ambassadors and their high commissioners. They are looking at us. You think wamekuja hapa ati encourage bilateral. Wamekuja hapa kujua how much more these fishers, they are visible to them. And as such, they have made our continent fair game for destructive proxy wars sponsored by nations with significant economic and military strength. These actors have the strategic intent of using the chaos and confusion perpetrated by self-serving leaders across our human capital to access our human capital, our mineral wealth, our agricultural potential, to grow their own economies at our own expense. To compound this further, societies experiencing these levels of internal discontent are susceptible to an even more sinister type of enemy, and that is violent extremism. Organizations hell-bent on disseminating and entrenching their misguided ideologies through violence. And we know, you see in Kenya we have Al-Shabaab, here you have ADF causing problems all across the border, disturbing citizens, not allowing people to move forward. But why are these groups able to do that? They are able to do that because there is somehow feeling that there is a vacuum in which they want to come here and push. Because we have also failed in trying to have this inclusive society. If we were one, these would not be problems. Al-Shabaab problem, ADF problem would be a problem of East Africa, not a problem of individual countries. You don't have the capacity. These people have no color. You know, they have no tribe. They just have an ideology which is warped. So today they will bomb you in Kampala, tomorrow they'll be bombing me in Kiambu, or they'll be bombing somebody else in Dar es Salaam. But if we were together, we are able to fight and to confront these issues while at the same time working towards the prosperity of our nations. So, the peace and security crisis that looms over many parts of our continent is a clear and present danger to Africa's long-term viability as a going concern. And if we don't find ways to resolve these conflicts soon, we may have generations of young people wiped out as cannon fodder, and with them, any prospect of uplifting the lives of our people. So you millennials and Gen Zs and all of us, we are also told we are young people by the Vice President. I agree, even me, I'm still young. You're told you're as young as you feel. Me, I feel young. But anyway, there are those who are millennials, you have your Gen Zs here as well. Allow me to state this point once more for emphasis. Nobody outside of Africa is coming to save you. Do not have any misguided thought that there's anybody who is coming to save you. In the words of Elrich Cleaver, an American writer and civil rights activist, you are either going to be part of the solution or you are part of the problem. This message holds true today as it did decades ago at the height of America's civil rights movement. The good news also, however, I believe, is that I have witnessed such a pivotal moment to effect change. All the elements necessary to bring about lasting and irreversible change are currently within your grasp as young people. And why, you say, do I say this? And let me just say, for starters, again, as has been mentioned, the demographics, first and foremost, are in your favor. The median age across our African continent in 2025 is 19.3 years, a against a global median of 30.4 years. This means that over 65% of all Africans are below the age of 25. You have the numbers, you have the time, you have the energy to get involved and stay involved in governance discussions until you effect the change you wish to see. You have the power. Our elder there here told us that when he stood here starting his journey, he was 23 years old. He's now 88, going 89, still fighting. Some of you have not even touched 23, and you are lamenting. My friend, this is a call to action. Get up and start moving. This is the call to action. Now is the time. Now, not tomorrow, not the day after, not after you graduate. No. Now is the time. Now. So, like I said, you have the numbers, you have the time, and you have the energy to get involved and stay involved in governance discussions until you effect the change you want to see. Furthermore, you are also the beneficiaries of years of investment in education and digital connectivity. You have the knowledge. You are, in essence, the first children of that knowledge economy, the true digital natives of Africa. The democratization of access to information through the internet means that very few secrets are left. Very, very few. Very, very few secrets. The asymmetry of information in favor of government has always been a tool to manage the perception of populations. This is no longer the case. You know what we know. In many cases, you know it better because you have understood how to leverage the essential tools of today, such as artificial intelligence and the power of social media. Me, when I go and make a small statement somewhere, I think I'll be hidden myself in the middle of the bush. By the time I am getting home for lunch with my wife, she'll ask me, what were you doing talking out there? How do you know where I was? It's already, you young people have already pressed these buttons and it's all over. He was there and he said this. So we are living in a very dangerous time. Be very careful, especially of those of you who have two girlfriends. Is that over the last 60 years or so, as our countries have developed, so have the living and migration patterns of our citizens. And this is a wonderful fact. Millions of families have moved from rural towns to large urban settings in search of opportunity and better life. This migration has created a new generation of non-ethnically homogeneous populations across the country. The result, millions of young people born out of intermarriages and unshackled by the negative weight of ethnic identity are slowly becoming the majority. As I alluded to you earlier in my speech, never before have there been such ideal conditions to break loose from the generational curse of our forefathers and of some of us that saw us remain chained to ethnic and cultural differences as a way to distribute wealth and political power. Finally, let us tackle the last part that I posed to you. What does it mean to be a young African competing for limited economic opportunities with close to 1 billion other young Africans? And I believe we need to see our strength in numbers as Africans. And in spite of having the world's youngest population and a market size of over 1.5 billion people, Africa still accounts for less than 2.5% of global trade. We have designed our trade corridors to favor extraction as opposed to intra-Africa trade, meaning that today it is easier for a Kenyan or a Ugandan to sell tomatoes and avocados to the European Union than it is to supply our brethren in West Africa. Similarly, unfortunately, it is easier for an American or European passport holder to visit African countries visa-free than it is for an African to traverse their own continent. If we are to create economic opportunities for our youth, we need to remove the barriers that prevent the actualization of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement or the East African Protocol on Trade. We need to remove every single barrier. We must stop being paranoid about each other and give preferential treatments to African passport holders to visit and to do business anywhere on their continent. We must design our transport and logistics infrastructure to point inward to facilitate more cross-border trade by allowing for the affordable and efficient movement of people, goods and services across our continent. And closer to home, we need to reflect on our education curriculum. Are we training our children for the jobs of the future? The advancements in technology have rendered many traditional careers irrelevant, yet we are still spending millions of dollars every year encouraging our children to pursue courses that will lead them to nowhere. Today, the world needs doers, people who can get things done. This is a preference of functionality over form, as one of you here had mentioned. We need functionality. So I would summarize my response to the third question as follows. One, we must increase our share of global trade as Africans by deliberately focusing on intra-African trade or East African trade. Two, we need to evolve our education system to encourage our youth to be entrepreneurial and tailor our curricula to be fit for purpose in the knowledge economy. And three, we need to actively influence the adoption of domestic policies on macroeconomic management that create a conducive environment for the private sector to thrive. So ladies and gentlemen, I've always been passionate about the role of our youth in leadership, and it is a subject that I can talk about for hours on end. However, I'm cognizant that today we are limited in time to exchange these ideas. So I'd just like to touch on some perspectives that I have garnered from my 30 years or so in active politics and my 10 years as President of the Republic of Kenya. And these perspectives delve into the basics of leadership and what I feel are the irreducible minimums that we must all aspire to as leaders in the new world that we are navigating. The first is integrity and leadership. And this is not merely a moral idea, it is a practical necessity. It involves a conviction to do right when it is costly, and to serve when it is easier to exploit. Integrity builds legitimacy, and legitimacy fosters peace. Leadership is a journey filled with challenges and triumphs. Reflecting on my own tenure, I did face numerous challenges, including corruption, rising debt levels, so on and so forth. But these experiences taught me that humility, listening, and continuous learning are the core to ethical leadership. Courage, my friends, courage is the underestimated quality, but it is something that you shall require in abundance if you are to transcend ethnic mobilization for power, short-term populism, and dependency on elite networks. Leadership should be based on vision and competence, not tribal affiliations. Policies should be designed for long-term national benefit, not immediate political gain. Opportunities should be accessible to all based on merit and hard work. Focused and determined is what you shall need to be in order to confront the status quo and compel a shift to a merit-based governance model that values competence over connections, transparency over transactional politics, and places citizens, not politicians, at the center of public service. Young leaders, as I conclude my remarks, I would like to recognize that universities like this are not just centers of learning, but they are incubators of change. They nurture values, ethics, and civic consciousness. You, as guild presidents and student leaders, are not merely representatives of your peers. You are the trustees of tomorrow's Africa. Your leadership today will shape the governance structures of our nations tomorrow. The power of an integrated East Africa lies in shared values, youth-led civic movements, and collaborative governance reforms. I encourage the creation of a cross-border youth action plan for integrity as outlined in your own summit agenda. You are the first true East African generation. Think beyond borders. Think vision. For you, your sake, and for the sake of future generations, my call to action for our youth is to lead with conviction, not convenience. To our institutions, I ask you, empower and equip these young leaders meaningfully with the skills and knowledge they need to actualize their potential. To the development partner present, it is my hope that you shall consciously invest in an integrity-driven leadership development. It is said that history is often written by the powerful, but the future will be shaped by the principle. I express hope in this generation's courage, creativity, and conscience. I reiterate support once again for the GPLA's mission and Makerere University's leadership in all of this. Let your voices rise not just as echoes of the past, but as my father said, as architects of a new dawn, an East Africa that works for all and leaves no one behind. I thank you all for your attention. May God bless you. May God bless our beautiful region of East Africa and our wonderful continent of Africa. Asante sana.
Welcome to the Mother University. I am saying this is the Mother University because it was the first and for a very long time the only university in the entire East and Central African region. All the other universities are our children. And Your Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, you told me this morning that you didn't know that your father was the first recipient of a degree from Makerere University. Because on 29th June 1963, the University of East Africa was born out of Makerere, which had been a college of the University of London. So becoming a full university was on 29th June 1963, when the Chancellor at that time, who was President Nyerere, conferred the first honorary degree of Bachelor of Laws to President Jomo Kenyatta. So he was the first recipient of a degree at Makerere University. Makerere University has come of age. Of course, we at the vanguard of training the leaders for independence, almost the entire East African leadership in the struggle for independence were trained here at Makerere University. Almost the entire cabinets of the 3 East African countries, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, were trained at Makerere University, the independence cabinets. And up to now, almost the entire cabinet of Uganda and the entire parliament are trained at Makerere University. At that time, Makerere University was training leaders to move our people out of the chains of colonialism. And indeed, we achieved that. We trained leaders to manage our post-independence countries with the challenges we had at the time. And I think we did a good job. But Makerere now is training leaders as in a way, His Excellency Ssentamu has said, to solve the problems of today. Many people tend to think that all problems will be solved by politics. It is not true. Leaders do not necessarily have to be politicians. Leaders are at every stage of life in a community. And therefore, for us at Makerere, we are designing our programs, our research to address the challenges that Africa faces today. These include our very high population growth, the climate change which affects Africa worst of all, the issues of new diseases that are emerging in Africa that we did not have in the past, issues around food security and conflict resolution and others. This is what these young leaders must address. And I think, just Vyavakama told them, they are the leaders that are going to move Africa out of our chains of poverty. The biggest enemy we must fight in Africa is poverty. Our people are still living marginalized in very poor conditions. And wherever you are as a leader, that should be your first concern. We as Africans must know that nobody is going to come from out there and develop us. We can have friends who give a hand, but the responsibility of us transforming our continent, moving our people out of poverty is ours. And it is yours, you, the young leaders. You should always remember that. And I would like to thank you, President Uhuru, because your statement about what Trump was doing went around when he said, why are you complaining? Is that your uncle? Okay. You look after your own problems. Why do you think he's going to solve your problems? That was a very strong statement. We want to thank you very much. Once again, welcome back, and of course, Your Excellency Vice President, welcome back to your alma mater. We are happy to see you back, and thank you for representing the President. I would like to once again welcome all of you to Makerere University and urge you, the leaders, to discuss the issues that affect our continent, our region of East Africa, with intellect. And that's why I must tell you that for us at Makerere University, we say we cannot waste our best brain.
Here this afternoon is very simple. To relate to you the message of His Excellency the President, and thereafter invite His Excellency Uhuru, my brother, my friend, to make his address. Before I do that, allow me to welcome Your Excellency Uhuru to Uganda and ask all of us to give him a loud round of applause. Great time for this very important ceremony, and also travel specifically for this ceremony, which sincerely do appreciate.
Asante sana.
Secondly, allow me to pray a warm bilateral relationship between our sister countries, the Republic of Kenya and the Republic of Uganda. I bring all of you warm greeting from His Excellency General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, the President of the Republic of Uganda. I will continue speaking after you have appreciated his greetings. Appreciating his greeting because he knows that you are in all his bazoo full. Let me congratulate all of you, the Guild Presidents, on successfully hosting this very important summit here this afternoon. I will now proceed to make the message of His Excellency the President to you. Your Excellency Uhuru, President's delegate, the representative, there is a written message, but I would like to to share with you the message of His Excellency the President, which was communicated on phone. I think written messages used to be very common before the mobile phones were, before the advent of the mobile phones. But now with the mobile phones, His Excellency the President can even give his message on phone. And I ask you to listen keenly because you will not have a written message. Firstly, he asked me to share with you the 3 points. He gave me only 3 points. He asked me to, Your Excellency, to share with the youth, the Great Presidents, the 3 historical missions, the 3 points on the historical mission of NRM, including strategic security, nationalism, but in addition to that, prosperity for all. Those are the 3 points which he asked me to share with Your Excellency and the distinguished audience in this House. And on wealth creation, Uganda will continue to prioritize the involvement of the youth in the socio-economic transformation of our country. And Uganda has already guided through responsible MDAs that the wealth and the jobs are in 4 sectors. The sector of commercial agriculture, manufacturing and industry, services sector, and the ICT sector. And Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, Uganda will continue to have an economy which is based on export promotion and import substitution. An economy which is independent, self-sustaining, and integrated. And the youth of Uganda are all welcome, and some are already participating in building that economy. An economy which is to lead Uganda to an industrialized country, like many countries in Africa are doing. So I would like to invite all the youth to participate in the socio-economic transformation of Uganda in those 4 sectors which I have highlighted. Because when we do that, we enable our country to achieve Vision 2040 for the case of Africa, Vision 2063, and the Sustainable Development Goals for the case of the United Nations. Your Excellency, His Excellency the President asked me also to use one example, that when you produce goods in one part of the country, in one part of the continent, it should teach you and I, it should teach all of us to value each other. He specifically asked me to tell you that for the case of Banyankole, they produce similar products, e.g. milk, maybe bananas, and so on. And the people who the Banyankole need most are those that do not come from Ankole and those who do not produce those similar products. Because with the value addition now, those products can be marketed anywhere within Uganda, anywhere within East Africa, anywhere in the African market. And what am I suggesting? I'm suggesting that as you, the guild leaders, meet here, you must embrace unity. You must embrace the spirit of Pan-Africanism. You must embrace the spirit of hard work. Because it is very easy to say what I'm saying, but more often than not, it is a bit difficult to make implementation on a collective level. Let us, as the youth, involve ourselves in creating wealth, prosperity for the country, and prosperity for all of us. When you come from another part of the country, you may be producing another product, and therefore you need other people to buy that product. So the first point is very clear, Your Excellency, is on prosperity, and that prosperity should be turned to where you will find a market. And that gives me great pleasure because I recognize the fact that here we have the East African scope. And that means that when we are looking at the market, for the market, we shall get the market in the East African countries. We shall get the market in COMESA. And we shall get the market in the African continental free trade area, security. And here, Uganda is looking at military security, political security, economic security, environmental security, and cultural or social, if you like, call it. Your Excellency, security is a fundamental pillar, is a fundamental prerequisite. It is a bedrock without which economic transformation cannot take place. So Uganda will continue to provide all the people of Uganda peace from border to border. We all know the history of Uganda. The Honorable Matthew Ikaire has just told you how he was in Kenya doing special duties in order to liberate Uganda. We all know, especially for those who come from northern Uganda, the 2-decade conflict which ravaged the social infrastructure and services in that part of the country. For those of you who come from Karamoja, you know that conflict of cattle rustling which distorted the development of the whole region and even the neighboring areas. And it even crosses over to Your Excellency, the Pokot of Kenya and the Turkana of Kenya. For those of you who come from Kasese, you know the intermittent challenges that Uganda has over the years faced in that direction of the country. You can name them until cows come back home. I have many examples where I come from in Teso. So Your Excellency, I'm here to assure the youth on behalf of His Excellency the President that Uganda is now safe and Uganda will forever be safe for you to make the choice, to make an investment, to produce and get the products to the market without any challenges. I thought we would thank His Excellency the President. Because of that peace and security, we can now talk about being a middle income class country. And we are moving forward towards becoming upper middle income class country and beyond. The government of Uganda has invested, Your Excellency, heavily on the youth who are here, including myself. The youth who are here are very healthy because of the government program of immunization for all. When they were still young people. Immunization for all is a reason. That's why we are now talking about 80% of the youth being under 30 years. Because the maternal mortality in the country and the infant mortality in the country is now history. The killer diseases can hardly kill the young children because of the immunization. So I want to thank first your parents for responding to the NRM program of immunization for all. And when they say the parents responded to those programs, there is no way you can deviate from the parents. I call upon all of you to continue listening out and checking out on areas, on programs of government where you as the youth can benefit, especially the livelihood programs of government. So that security, food security, there is also an issue of food security. So it can fit very well under the security issue and the environment. We know that Uganda is gifted by nature, very beautiful country. Water bodies, fresh water bodies, Lake Kyoga, Lake Victoria, some of them are shared. We have very beautiful forests, flora and fauna. I would like to Excellency to use this opportunity to remind the youth, I know that they already know, that that category of nature that God gave us falls under environmental security. And it is your role and responsibility to work with the corresponding MDAs of the government to ensure that our environment is intact. I know that many of you have projects on tree planting, many of you have projects on recovery of the areas which are deforested. I encourage you to continue doing that. With an environment which is intact, we stand to continue attracting huge numbers of tourists. And that means a lot to our resource envelope. And that means a lot to the sustainability of our economy. Of constitutionalism, the rule of law, and democracy. Every 5 years, we go out for an election. I got the message from the panelists here on some challenges of election procedures. But very important to note is that first and foremost, after every 5 years, the NRM government guarantees that there are going to be an election as per the constitution. So you are the brains, you are the pillars, you are the resource of the country. This is a time that you use dialogue to fix the great areas which you have noticed and government may have also noticed. And I like the method of identifying good mechanisms of working together without creating counterproductive actions. So look at the way you as the youth of East Africa, you as the youth of Uganda, can fix those challenges. There is someone who always reminds me when I call him and says that you see what you can also do. See what you can also do. As we go back after this summit, let's also think about what we can also do that can positively impact on the situation that you think is getting out of hand. Your Excellency, finally on nationalism. On nationalism, but on the security, we need to also work together as East African countries in order to avert the global challenges. Because when you are a country and you are alone, you may have your armed forces. But because of what my senior, Right Honorable has said, you may not manage alone to deal with a global challenge if you are an independent country. But once you have a bloc like the East African bloc, the Southern African bloc, and so on and so forth, you can combine the weapons which every country has. I'm not telling you to go and start combining the weapons. But we are saying that why do we have to have an integrated strategic security system as a region? Because we can have the capacity to deal with global challenges. And the representative of the European Union is here. I think he stands as a very good example. How did the European Union create the bloc and why? One of the reasons is to deal with global challenges. Africa was colonized long ago, and Africa should never be colonized again. And that's why, as you are here, you should speak in terms of projections. How do you want Africa to be in the next 5 years? How do you want Africa to be in the next 10 years? How will Africa look like in the next 30 years? I am sure because of what the Honorable Hakana Rukunda, the Honorable Mikaile, and His Excellency the President, they did that. They projected how they wanted Uganda to be at that time when they were in the liberation struggle. And we, you and I, are now the beneficiaries of their projection. So I'd like you to ask a question. Who will be the beneficiaries of your projection? And what will those beneficiaries achieve in your projection? That's how it works. Generations must be interconnected. And Your Excellency, I'm happy because in Uganda, there is no discrimination based on gender, based on religion, based on tribe, and even based on age. That's why His Excellency the President has just celebrated 80 years, but all these Bazukuru here are saying they want him again to vote him next year. They are all voting him. That is the meaning of the interconnectedness of the age groups. When I was a Minister of Youth for Children Affairs, we used to say that we have 3 categories of youth. The first category is the senior youth. The second category is the elderly youth. And the third category is the youth. And for Africa to avert global threats. Finally, Your Excellency, leaders, nationalism. Nationalism, unity. His Excellency the President has asked me to continue encouraging you to be the youth that love their country and that are very enthusiastic to build their country, regardless of the challenges. The youth are, first of all, physically strong. The youth have so many miles to walk compared to the old people. And therefore, in case of anything, you should be the ones preserving what the government has already consolidated in order to build on. With this kind of conference, a leader like me would not like to hear about a strike again in Makerere University or any other university in the region. You know how much, someone remembers me when I was a Minister of Education, there were strikes when I was a Minister of Education in the universities, in the secondary schools. But with summits like this, we think that those kinds of counterproductive activities can be abated through other means of sharing with the management of the universities. So you, the youth, should preserve what the country has and work hard to build on more and more. The youth have a platform in Uganda and also in all African countries and indeed East Africa. We do meet in other regional meetings with His Excellency when the President sends me. The youth now in Africa, all of them have a platform at the village level. They speak at the village meeting, the council, the village council. They have, by law, they are part of the council at the village level. They are part of the council members at the parish level. They are part of the council members at the sub-county level. They are part of the council members at the district level. And indeed at the parliament. Specifically, the youth seats are secured. We do have the youth councils, the structures from national to the grassroots, and many other fora. So I encourage all of you to connect to each other, to meaningfully use those arenas which by law have been created for you. Because when you do that, you appreciate the level in which government has invested in all of you. Uganda remains one of the best investment destinations globally. Uganda remains one of the best tourism destinations globally. That's where you are having as a starting point. And maybe the Honorable Kaile Matthew did not have that as a starting point. Maybe the time the Honorable Uhuru was a youth, that was not a starting point. So because you have a much more firm and solid starting point, we also, the elders, have high expectations on you. And please do not disappoint us. Finally, I would like you to refer to your theme of today, lead us with integrity. I would like to give you a word of counsel. The question I'm going to give you applies to all of you, the people who read the Quran and the people who read the Bible. And it is very short and easy to remember. And this is in light of your theme. And the quotation is, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Can we repeat that? You may have seen it somewhere already, but I would like to re-emphasize that that's a very important point. Spirituality in Africa is a reality. We are very God-fearing people. And in Uganda, you can refer even to your motto. Our motto says, for God and my country. You are the pillars of our country, and please remain guided. Accept guidance. Once in a while, when the parent gives you guidance, listen. When the university administrator gives you guidance, listen. When a political leader comes to interact with you, listen. I know that at this age, the brain is too much focused towards the rights. You have enormous rights, enormous rights. As the student leaders, as the youth, and every other Ugandan citizen, we have the rights. But let me remind you that those rights come with responsibilities. Every time you point out your right, be quick also to attach a responsibility on that right. Every time you want to exercise your right, be quick to underscore the impact of that right on those near you and those across the country. Because if you do that, then you will not be walking alone. Because they say when you walk alone, you will walk very far, you will reach very far, very fast. But when you walk as a team, what happens when you walk as a team? When you walk alone, then constantly work as a team with the NRM government. Your Excellency, this meeting has reminded me about the competition which I went in Machakos sometime back when I was in second lieutenant. We went there for the games of the army, shooting, competing to shoot, but not shooting people. I hope there is no record there that we shot anyone. His Excellency says the other days we didn't shoot the person. We shoot the tag. And every year, the East African Armed Forces come together for their activities. Every year, the senior secondary schools have their games and sports. So I strongly support the idea that every year, these guild presidents of the region should commit to continue hosting a summit on a rotational level. I was not given that point, but arising from the messages which have been spoken. But when I also go back, I will have the privilege to report to His Excellency the President, and also note that that is strongly one of my recommendations. Is it supported? Yes. And when I was speaking to your chairperson, where is the chairperson? I was speaking to your chairperson, who was telling me that you also rely on so much on donations. So I was also telling him that we can also make a request to government. For me particularly, to His Excellency the President. I am happy that His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta is also here. So you might also go there and listen. We recommend that this Guild President Summit be made an annual and recognized annual where you come and share experiences, exchange knowledge, learn from each other. It's very important, and it builds strong connection and deepens the integration, as my brother, senior has said. So I am here to say that I'm prepared to walk with you the journey which you would like to take. And finally, Your Excellency, I would like to thank the Professor Nawangwe. Thank you for steering our alma mater. It is easy to say that me am an OG of Makerere. So thank you for steering our institution. And all the leaders who have come from different countries, thank you for coming to Uganda. Stay longer. And when you return, please send our own greetings to the other friends and brothers of ours in the East African region. And those who have come from beyond Africa, the same. Your Excellency, I would have continued to speak now my things, but when I was being briefed in the morning, His Excellency even was quick to say, since you are the one going to lead